Hey everybody, what's cooking? I have somebody a super cool person coming on to chat tonight about a very specific topic. Hey, how are you? Um, Hi, there you are. Um, and we're gonna get deep into this particular niche of subject. So I'm super excited. Um, Go ahead and Isaiah, go ahead and do, if you do the request, I should be able to let you on. Sometimes it works better if the person does the request than if I send it to you. There's so many airplanes tonight. I hope everybody can hear me. I'll speak up. Hey, Gervais, how are you? Good to see you.
Hi,
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you again. It's been
You
a
too.
minute.
Yeah, I think it's been since June.
Yeah, since Pride. That's crazy.
It's time is passing.
I know. I know. It's so funny because there's all these parallels, right, with time where sometimes in one respect I'm like, what is time even? I don't know what day it is. I have to keep checking. And then on the flip side, I keep being like, this year is gone, like it went. It's like.
I think it was the 6 months of April that really did it.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Thank you so much. I'm so happy to talk about. I like getting into like sort of specific niche topics, that you don't hear people chat about a lot. So Isaiah has an amazing video up on YouTube that speaks very frankly and with total authenticity about their decision to stop taking tea after three years, right, on HRT.
Yeah.
And you stopped in December, like end of last year.
Yeah, so it's been almost a year. Dang.
I'd say how that year just went. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting because, there's so many conversations about HRT, and, there's a lot of, as you mentioned in the video, which we can get into more, it's deciding to do it is such a huge thing, and then getting the availability and finding an endocrinologist or a healthcare worker that will work with you on it, and because it's such controlled access, especially with testosterone. um, and some people kind of like wig out or have like a hard time understanding why then somebody would stop taking it, because it was it's so many hurdles to even get there in the first place.
Mhm.
And the same thing, I know a couple of people who were on estrogen for quite a long period of time and opted to stop taking it. And physically, it was very challenging to transition out of that for their body, and onto something else. But I just wanted to kind of get into it and talk to you further and a little bit deeper about some of the things that you went through in that and coming to that decision.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially because when I was considering it, I was trying to do some research and find other people who had been on tea and decided to stop, and it just felt like there weren't really any resources out there. And I had a very difficult time finding people who had made that decision and had made a record of why they decided to do that and what happened to them afterwards. And so
Mm-hmm.
I could find lists of symptoms and like things that would happen physically, but I couldn't really find much about actual like what someone would go through or why. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to make that resource available for other people because it's not something that is talked about very frequently in the trans community, at least in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's at least a little bit stigmatized. So I think talking about it hopefully will help other people normalize it and feel like it's an option that is open to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me that just registers as being really, really important, for a number of reasons. But I think one too, because you know, I'm very much a proponent of normalizing a non-binary space and just allowing it to all be a little bit more fluid in general. You know, I myself have lots of issues with the binary in general. I've been on testosterone for, well, it's coming up on like 3 years pretty soon, actually. Um, but I, you know, I never went into it sort of with this desire to have an end result of passing per se. Like for me, it very much was just like a continuation of a specific journey of understanding my gender. So how would you identify now, or does this change how you identify, and sort of where have you landed with, or if you are, or are you still in process with understanding your own gender identity?
Yeah, I identify now as non-binary. I found a few different labels throughout my transition that worked for me at different periods. So for a long part of my transition, I identified as demi-boy, so partially male and partially non-binary. And over the past year or two, I guess 2 years now, I started to realize that maybe that connection that I'd felt to masculinity wasn't as present as it used to be. And some of the things that I had wanted out of a masculine presentation were, at least for me, more wanting distance from traditional femininity and being seen as a girl than feeling super masculine aligned, or at least that's how I feel now. So yeah, so that is the label that feels more comfortable for me now, and it at least partially contributed to me choosing to stop tea, because I have facial hair and I used to have really short hair and presented very masculinely, traditionally masculinely, and people would use he, him pronouns for me and traditionally masculine pronouns. And in general, it started to feel a little bit dysphoria inducing when people would misgender me with those pronouns. And so stopping tea was a way for me to kind of feel like I had control again over my gender presentation and the way that I could be seen and perceive myself, if that makes sense.
So have you sort of always been more they, them? Like, were you, or?
So when I first started transitioning, I used he, him, and they, them pronouns. But it kind of felt like people were using they, them, and never he, him, which kind of invalidated any feelings of masculinity. It felt like people didn't see me as a masculine aligned person. And so I went to strictly using he, him pronouns because it helped me feel validated as a masculine person. But over the last year or two, I guess 2 years now, time is passing. I've really just been using they, them pronouns. And that's been feeling better for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's, you know, even inside the trans community, there's a lot of attachment to the traditional binary. And it's always kind of been interesting for me. I get into a lot of conversations with people about, you know, that community sort of policing itself a lot. And it's really challenging for me personally, just because I see it as more, you know, if you can come to that level of acceptance about yourself, wouldn't that, just through like empathy and awareness, then, you know, just automatically sort of make you have a space for other people to be in process, you know, and to not have to be quite so still defined by that societal structure that's been set up, right? That's been placed.
Yeah.
So to me, it's, you know, I feel like in someone's journey, they can go through all these different phases, right? They can go through things, and because it is a journey, right? You're constantly evolving. If you're, you know, if you're, you know, using your brain and processing your life and your experiences and allowing them to speak to what you're going through and how, you know, use them to articulate where you're at. I mean, to me, it's just like the next step is having your sort of outward appearance foster that as well, you know, no matter what it looks like. You know, people go through, but I mean, I was a punk when I was a kid. I was goth. I had every color hair. I've done all the things. Like, you know what I mean? To me, it's just kind of like, it just goes with what you're experiencing and how you're moving through your journey and what you're learning about yourself. And it's fun to get to do an external presentation of that. And I feel like it's the same thing with gender as well, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
About like allowing space for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
How old were you when you started HRT?
I was 16 years old, so I was a minor still. So my experience starting HRT was a little bit different from a lot of people who start after they turn 18. So I went to like a child endocrinologist or a pediatrician endocrinologist, and so it was a little bit of a different process, but largely I think at least a little bit was still similar. Yeah.
And in your experience, was your like at the time, was your family supportive? Like you had people around you that were in favor of this, yes?
Yeah, I was really lucky and privileged to have a family that sought to understand and over time became comfortable with an understanding of what it means to medically transition and why I would want that. And so when you're under 18, at least from my experience, it's very difficult to gain access to HRT without parental consent as well as your own consent. And luckily I did have that from my parents. So they came to me with came with me to all my endocrinologist appointments and helped me a lot with all of the Mishigo acid getting set up before I was allowed to start T.
And then, if you don't mind me asking, like, where are they with this process now? Like, did they sort of, I mean, I like to think of this like flipped world where, you know, you were transitioning and then they were like, what do you mean you're not transitioning? You know? But
yeah, I think they were a little bit shocked at first when I told them that I was off T. And that I was taking at least an extended break from it, if not stopping permanently. And but I kind of had the same talk and explained all of the reasons that I did in my video and that we're talking about now, about how it's not something I regret. Like I am so happy that I went on T, and I am really grateful for all the changes that occurred for me, and all of the things that I wanted out of T, like a deep voice and facial hair and other traditional masculinizations. I got those things out of T, and most of those things won't change not being on T anymore. And I think explaining that and going through it with them really helped them understand it in a more practical sense.
yeah, and so in that video, you talked a little bit about you know, things like your physical energy and another, like sort of a list of items. And I found that really helpful because you know, it is one of those things you can't pick and choose which aspects of it you get. It's not, you know, like I always joke, I'm like, how about a little less nose hair and a little more like shift in where I carry my weight and my bottom half of my body. I don't know, just throwing it out there. Because there's always like, you know, you don't have a choice. It's like all of a sudden all these changes occur and you know, you just kind of have to roll with it. My endocrinologist, every time she says like, what's going on? And I'll tell her, and then she's like, okay, well, is any of that a deal breaker? And I'm like, no, like I'm good. I'm just going to keep rolling. She's like, okay. You know, cause it's an event that alone is an adventure, right? Like the changes in your body as well. But so if you don't mind, talk a little bit about sort of the main, if there were any main attributes. I mean, obviously there were emotional things and mental things that you thought through, but were there any physical aspects of it that contributed to your decision to stop taking testosterone?
A little bit. I think I wanted a little bit of weight redistribution because I felt like it would help with but let me back up a little bit. So I guess my like goal one of my goals with my form of gender expression is for people to look at me and be confused at what my gender is. That's one of my goals. Because like, if people are going to perceive me and assign a gender to me in their minds, I want them to at least not be certain about whatever gender they're assigning me. And so because of that, and also because of what I was hoping for in terms of how my relationship with my body has changed over time, I was hoping for a little bit of weight redistribution and a little bit more of like an indented waist rather than like the like more straight up and down that came from being on T. That was like one of the big things that I really wanted from it. And also, I don't want my hairline definitely, I've lost a good bit of it from being on T. And so I'm excited that I won't be losing any more.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because I've had a lot of people ask me about that since I've been on testosterone, was like, or people not knowing that and me saying, well, I had to look back at my like family history, because they basically say, you know, if you, whatever it is if you have like strong male pattern baldness, etc. in your family, then essentially the same thing will happen to you. And you know, it's again, you know, I think about it, is it a deal breaker? No, I haven't had too much of it so far. You know, my hair has always been kind of fine, and it's starting to get probably a little tiny bit thinner. But, you know, when I get to that point, it's like I'll either shave my head completely or I'll tattoo it or do something. But, but, you know, there are all these things I think that people don't necessarily think about, but they're all very important. You know, and some are more important to some people than others. I have a friend that has been on estrogen for about 5 years, maybe 6 years. And to them, like, the weight redistribution is the very most important thing, is that feminization of their hips and bust, and they've had surgery on their jaw especially. But, you know, again, at the end of the day, I feel like the most important thing is that it feels like you know, like whatever that is, that you're, whatever you have and you're working on, you know. I get frustrated sometimes, and because I grew up in Southern California, and like, I am the only female in my family that hasn't had at least one cosmetic surgery, if not 7 or 8. And, you know, to me, I think if it's about self-expression and that you're happy and confident and you feel good in your own skin when you look in the mirror, to me, you know, the idea of not having access to that, or having it be something that's restricted and like jailed and policed from people, seems insane. You know, you can go and get a nose job. You literally can go and get an actually like not healthy amount of surgery at once if you want to, for a cosmetic reason. But if it's something that is like really important to you and a part of your understanding of yourself and your gender identity and your, you know, who you are inside, and feeling complete, and then they are sitting there being like, yeah, no, like, you're gonna have to go through every single hoop possible in order to be able to do that. It's insane to me.
Yeah,
It makes no sense.
That's why I'm really glad. I can't remember for the life of me right now what it's called, but there's some new organization that is doing, like, they'll send you your T or estrogen, and like they'll help you get your letter so you can have access to it, and then they'll send it to you, and it's not available in all states yet, but they're working on it. I can't remember what it's called, but
when you figure out what it is, text it to me or DM it to me,
yeah,
because
sure.
I would love to. I'm working on our new site, and I'm going to have like a resources page on it, and I would love to add something like that to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that they're working on expanding their access as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, you know, it's going to require a lot of advocacy, because I just don't, a lot of people who, want these changes. It's hard enough, honestly. This country doesn't value mental health, and it certainly doesn't value physical health because they don't make any money off of people being healthy. But this idea that this idea that um, basically there are people who just have zero access. They already don't have healthcare access. Then you add to it the desire or need to do something like this, and it's not possible for them to get it. So yeah, that's part of why I want to have this company be successful, because I have many grants and organizations that I want to start with this regard to service the queer community down the road, like lots
That's
of
awesome.
them.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I feel like being able to be safe, have access to all the same government subsidized items that people are allowed to have. Just like, I'm not even talking about crazy. I'm just talking about equality. Shouldn't be that hard. Like,
Yeah.
Just equality. That's all I'm after.
Yeah. Equality and equity and accessibility to resources is really.
Yeah.
I know that's a lot to ask.
Which is so terrifying, right? That we live in a time and a country like in 2020 and in America, where we're like, oh, it's so hard to do it here. And I have friends in all these other countries that are just like, oh yeah, you guys are just way behind. You're just not understanding what's up. Yeah, it's a huge mission of mine. I wanted to ask you too, after I saw your video, you're very, we met during Pride and I loved your energy immediately, but there's something about you that's very, very accessible. And I want to just sort of ask you sort of like, is that your sort of natural personality? Do you feel like going through this experience and this gender journey has sort of amplified your voice and your sort of comfort level in talking about things publicly?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when it comes to like creating those resources through my videos, and like back when I first started T and I was making videos about the weekly changes and stuff, like it's all been like helping other people have access to resources and information and like seeing what could happen and having insight to like my mental process, at least, because I don't know, I just feel like the more information and resources that are accessible, the easier it will be for people to have these gender journeys and know what's going to happen to them and know if that's the right choice for them. And that's kind of something that's always been really important for me. I am a person with a lot of social anxiety, so I think sometimes it manifests maybe in slightly extroverted ways, but yeah, I don't know, it's not like intentional, but I am really glad that I have that effect.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like I actually don't know many people that don't have some type of social anxiety. Like the more that I talk to people, like everyone sort of says that, or they may not say it at first, but then, there'll be like a quiet moment in the quarter or something. And they're like, I'm just hanging out because I have some social anxiety. And I'm like, I think that's just existing on a certain level too in this day and age,
The
like
anxiety
the pressure,
of being alive.
Yeah, the pressure is on, especially I feel like with social media and the way in which people communicate. It's like, it's just so different, and the demand on our psyches and on our, the focus on presentation is so intense. Like it's so intense.
Mm-hmm. And also, I feel like for me at least, it's like the inability to control how others perceive you. Like whatever version of you exists in their mind could never actually be the person that you are that exists in your mind, because there's just no way to physically like share those two identities. And so even if you were like the most open and say every thought in your head, like there's no way to know what version of you exists in the minds of other people. And I think that's a big thing too, about not really knowing that.
Yeah, it's interesting too. It's kind of starts like with family. I find it interesting like that I mean, I'm I'm like super old now, but it's, I think about my I think about, my family, or I think about people that I knew when I was younger, and like how they hold on to you at whatever age they sort of knew you at, or like knew you best or were around you the most. I find that I do that with my kids sometimes in my own head. Like my kids are 30 and 28, and I will totally just like be talking to my son on the phone, and like in my head he's like 12. um and it's funny because it is that, like, accepting that it's kind of like, you know, it's akin to just sort of giving zero fucks at a certain point about what people think, because if you get too caught up in where the presentation is going to land, as opposed to just what feels good to you as far as what you're putting out there, I feel like that's where people get sort of tripped up, and they can get into sort of like a false bravado that they put out there.
Yeah, I feel like that's especially prevalent on social media. Like, I mean, I feel like everyone kind of curates their personhood and lived experience when they're posting on social media, but like particularly on Instagram.
Yeah. Particularly on Instagram.
And I'm like, I'm saying this, but like, I also do that. I think everyone who posts on Instagram is thinking about like, oh, what are people like? Oh, someone's going to see this. What are they going to think?
Yeah. Speaking of that too, if you don't mind me asking, what did that sort of play any role in or give you any cause for concern or fear or insecurity when you were going through these changes and through this decision making process, both the first time and the second time? Like, did it occur to you to be worried about or concerned about what your presentation would be like on social media, or to sort of like outside people that had come to know you a certain way?
Yeah, I think at least a little bit, because especially when I came to college 3 years ago, I just was I had joined a fraternity and I was very traditionally masculine presenting. And so I think when I was starting to experiment with other forms of expression that I had wanted to experiment with, but had felt kind of uncomfortable doing so beforehand,
Mm-hmm.
I think I felt a little bit uncomfortable because I know that, like, my fraternity brothers, when I was in a fraternity, saw me as this masculine aligned person that I'd been for 2 years, in their knowledge of me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that, like, my own fears of perception rather than like the ways they actually would have reacted, because I know that they would have all been supportive. I go to a very queer school. There's a lot of people doing whatever they want here. And so I know that people would be very supportive, but I think there's always that like internalized fear
Mm-hmm.
about perception and straying from the person that other people think you are, if that makes sense. Yeah, but then I think coming across different styles on Instagram and on YouTube kind of opened that up to me. And I was like, oh, I can, and coming across particularly like other non-binary people who were just kind of having fun with expression and not really like defining themselves around like traditionally binary dress styles, really
Mm-hmm.
helped me be like, oh, I can dress anywhere I want.
Yeah, and I feel like that reason exactly is why I was so touched by your video, and I appreciate it so much, because as we both know, representation is everything, right? It's like if you don't see anything that represents or shows what you're feeling or experiencing, it can be really challenging to validate yourself and your own thoughts of that. It's really tricky, and I feel like especially for younger people, like tweens or early in high school and people in puberty, there's a lot of struggle, and peer pressure is still I mean, it was terrible when I was a kid. It is terrible when my kids were kids. It's terrible now. It never goes away. Like, it's brutal. Um, but being able to like reach out and see these people being honest and very forthcoming with details and, you know, really talking through specific things. That's what I appreciated too, was you speaking on very specific points. That I think everybody has those questions. And even if it's just to give someone who's literally never had experience with any of this conversation, to see something where it's just like, yep, this is very matter of fact. This is, you know, was my experience. I'm putting it out there for you to, you know, take what feels good to you and leave what doesn't. It's just so helpful. It's just so helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that was my goal with creating that video and like the other videos that I created. Like the reason I started my channel in the first place was I was starting tea and my family members don't live very close to me, so I wouldn't be seeing them for a while. And we didn't want anyone to be like very shocked about the changes that were happening to me. And so that was like at least a little bit of my mentality going into making this video as well. Not only helping like other trans people who are on hormones like see another perspective or help them, like, because I've talked with a few people since I posted it who have been considering it but like didn't have a lot of information and hadn't really talked to any other trans people who had stopped HRT. So that was like one goal, but another one was just like thinking about my mom's friends, like who might see it and might not know much about all of these different things. So I was trying to explain it in a way that makes sense both to trans people so that I didn't feel like I was explaining to them their own experiences in like a child, like a condescending way, but also at the same time was in plain enough terms to help people who had no idea what I was talking about at least get some semblance of understanding of that type of experience.
Yeah, and I definitely when we switch over to our new site, which hopefully is going to be in the next couple months, I'm making it myself, so it's taking a second because, but we're going to have more of a forum, and I'm going to have like we're going to have monthly contributors. I have everyone from like sex workers to you know, people who work in the medical community that are going to be contributing to that, just for a space for people to talk about all of these issues. But I would love to, you know, I'm definitely, if you're cool with it, I want to post the link to the video. I want to post it and maybe have you, you know, on to do a Q&A too after we have that. Just we can have people DM us questions because I do think it's one of those things where you know, I've had a lot of conversations on here about very specific things, especially about, you know, body changes and when I, even maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I started really thinking about this and looking into things, I didn't find a lot of information. I didn't find anything about, you know, like undergrowth or bottom growth. I found nothing about, you know, there's kind of only like fetishizing the trans community or, you know, like being, trying to ostracize them. And I really had a hard time. I really struggled. And part of what I took from that was, you know, never again. I want to start talking about this all the time. I want to start talking about this in very specific detail. We do get pinged and you know, bothered a little bit by Facebook and Instagram. So that's why I kind of want to have this other forum where we can talk a little bit deeper, and I can post things and have people talk about stuff, because all of that, you know, as minute as a lot of those details are, it's good to know going in. It's good to know before you make decisions. And it's also good to know while it's happening, because I've had friends that have reached out to me and been like, hey, I got to say, man, like, did you ever have this happen? Like, I feel crazy. And I'm like, yes, it's totally fine.
Like
it's totally normal.
There are so many times I feel like you'll experience something very specific and you go to Google it, and I'm like, and I don't know what to Google, and then there's like not responses. Like I have a difficult time remembering things because I am in the process of maybe learning that I have ADD or ADHD as an adult. And so I have a very difficult time remembering things, especially things that I'm supposed to do regularly. So that was one of my really big issues when I was on T, was remembering to do my shot every single week. And I was trying to Google search like reminders for trans people on testosterone with ADHD, how to do shot. And like there's nothing, like I couldn't find anything like that, but like there's all these minute experiences, and when you don't have those resources, even when there are other people experiencing them and you can't access them, I feel like it makes you feel really alone in your experiences, even when there are a ton of other people experiencing the same thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like that representation and community and communicating about it. I can't tell you how many times. So I was taking them always on like Thursday. I was taking my shot, and then I messed up, and so I was like, okay, now it's Friday, and then I messed up, and it became like Sunday, and then I was like, oh, now it's Sunday night. I'm just like, you know, all of these things. I think that there's hopefully, you know, ways moving forward that everybody can start to really normalize these. I have friends in the medical space that are also in the queer community that have been talking about apps and things of that nature for that purpose, and for helping people who have to take the combination of that and particular medicines, or, you know, things that have to be separated during the week that can't be done at the same time. I think that all of that, you know, it's all coming, but it is one of those things where, you know, the littlest thing like that, and you can really not feel well. Like, yeah, you can really not feel well.
Or, like, I'm really glad that resources have been developing like that, because, like, I had my, like, trans realization in, like, 2014, and I was, like, 14 or 15 years old. And at that time, when I was Googling things, like, there were a couple of YouTubers and like a couple of Tumblr blogs here and there. But like there wasn't much information. And so I had to like really dig through the internet and then like find other trans people and ask them questions because I couldn't find much. And so I'm really glad to have seen that body of information out there grow. But I'm excited to see where it goes from there once people start talking about their experiences more and feel more comfortable talking about the parts of the experiences that aren't already talked about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I really, you know, at some point I want to sort of make like you know, a private access space. So I do lots of photography for years and years, and I want to do like a series photographing different trans bodies, because I really think it's important to be able to see that, not to be fetishized, not to have it be like in a sexual connotation, more in a way of just understanding. And of course, all bodies are beautiful because they belong to that person. But I do think it's really tricky, and being able to sort of see things and how people's bodies have changed and sort of document that is something that is really important to me. Because again, just like you, when I first started looking around, I was just like, I got nothing. Like, you know, I had to really start seeking out people, individual people, and you know, sort of like really personal questions. So, you know, all of that, I think it's all doable. I think that there's going to be a lot of policing still. I can't tell you the level of censorship that we experience as a queer business on the internet is insane, like constantly. Like all of our ads get rejected. We have to appeal them, all the time. We're in a constant state of like fighting to be recognized and have our stuff seen, and put out there. But it's so worth it. Like every time we go to battle, I'm just like, let's do this, because I'm not giving up anytime soon. Like eventually this won't be such a process. And, you know, I think we all just have to keep doing these contributions. And I think your video is an amazing contribution. And, you know, hopefully you keep going with the channel and you keep going, you know, talking about how it's going and keeping people updated, because it really is a very specific journey that you're on, you know, and you're still so young. Like, you know, and I can say that because I'm 50. You know, and you're still so young, and there's so much for you to experience still. And being able to sort of document that journey is great, because it has been an unusual one. It's awesome.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Is there anything that you sort of just for anybody who's joined us more recently, or who is catching this when they rewatch it partway through, Isaiah was on testosterone and was in a state of transitioning and chose to stop doing HRT and sort of be in the middle in a non-binary presenting space. And inside of that, are there any sort of things you'd want to tell people who might be in the same situation as you, or who are having thoughts about wanting, you know, they've already started on this path and now they're kind of like, I don't know if this is quite right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the very first thing I think is that being on T, or choosing to stop T, or choosing never to be on T, or HRT in general, or any form of medical transition, none of those things invalidate your identity as a trans person. Like, if you choose to
100%.
stop T, that doesn't make you any more or less trans than someone who stays on T for their whole life. Like, that has no correlation to the validity of your identity or your gender or your experiences. Like, I feel like that's the main thing that I was trying to get across, that you are not, your identity is the same no matter what you choose to do in terms of medical transition.
Yep. Absolutely. And I mean, that's kind of the most important thing about inclusion, right? Is this sense that there's a right way or a wrong way to be trans, or a right way or a wrong way to be queer, or anything, you know, it's sort of counterintuitive to the experience of stepping outside of the you know, the social structure that was imposed on people. Mm-hmm. It just, yeah, to me, it doesn't really make sense. It's like there's this is the ultimate in freedom and freedom of expression. And, you know, people are art, like our journey. It is an art form. Just being able to experience life and process it and get to know each other and help people. Gotta make space for things to look different, because the more we kind of like try to label and box everything, you know, to me, all of those are just forms of exclusion, which.
Yeah. And I feel like, especially like having diverse representations of the trans experience is so important, because I feel like a lot of the times when you see trans people in media, or well-known trans people, they're like white, able-bodied, like thin, and traditionally like binary presenting. And I just feel like there needs to be so much more diversity, so that people can see themselves and their actual experiences in the trans media that they're consuming, rather than just seeing like the one type that gets portrayed a lot.
Yeah, because all of it gives you permission to step outside what you've known or what you've been taught. And that's the most important thing about existence is, you know, it's the hardest thing to do a lot of the time, right? Is giving yourself permission to go into an unknown terrain. Like, mm-hmm. But that's what helps people grow. It's what makes you strong, powerful. It's like, I feel so empowered when I step outside of what I've been told I have to do, or that, you know, there's going to be some type of like severe punishment or whatever, you know, for not being this way. I mean, I didn't come to this until way late, you know, way later in the game. I was like legit middle-aged when I realized that when I really had the understanding of my gender separate mm-hmm. from my sexuality, because I just didn't really have like intellectually I knew it, but I really didn't have the vocabulary like inside myself to define that separately.
Mhm.
So it took me a long time to get to that spot. And I had all these feelings. I had a hard time, like, I think I had a sensation like I would have to give up what somehow or disassociate from from motherhood and from, you know, having raised children and like done these things. And it was a lot of processing for me because I, you know, got to that point where I realized I was like, oh no, we're not taking any of that off the menu. That's part of the sum total of me and my life experiences. I don't have to let go of anything in order to have this other thing. I can
Mhm.
just add it.
Yeah.
So, but you know, it took me a really long time to even understand that. So I credit, I strongly credit your age group and your generation because they have been really outspoken and great about not taking shit off of anybody about this. And it's badass. Like, I love it.
Yeah, I feel very grateful to be a part of a generation where I, at least in my lived experience, have found just so many people that I've connected with and felt comfortable around and felt like I was able to talk about this with, um, whether that be in like my academic environments or in my social environments, like just in general, I've felt very lucky and privileged to be surrounded by the people that I have.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you have an open invitation to hang out with us at Playout anytime, as you know. I am just so happy that I got to meet you, and you know, I'm hoping we can continue this conversation in the future. And I really, if you're out there and you have any questions about this topic, you can always DM us. And I'm pretty forthcoming person also. So I think between you and I, we're happy to speak to anything. And yeah, I really just keep doing what you're doing. I think we just need more and more people, being able to just talk about things openly and put it out there and give people some peace when they see it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I hope that other people also feel comfortable at some point starting to open up and share their journeys about these like parts of transness that
Please do.
as talked about.
Please do, people. Like, do it. If we don't share our journeys, yeah, I think everyone, it's sort of it's just a general disservice, and not just our community, but to allyship as well, because they need to understand, right? Like people, I know a lot of people who really, they just don't know where to get the information. And sometimes I joke, I'm like, I'm not sure Google, like, I'm not gonna go look stuff up before you talk to me. But also, you know, it in more sensitive subject lines, you know, people they could Google and they still won't understand what they're looking at. They need it to be sort of qualified in some way. So I think it's good for everybody to just share their stories.
Yeah, if they feel comfortable doing
Yeah,
so.
of course. I mean, you know, no pressure. No pressure. All right.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. And I am going
Thank you.
I'll follow up with you, because if you think of that organization that's helping give people access, let me know, because I would love to include it on our resources page as well. That'd be
Yeah,
awesome.
for sure. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for talking with me about all this stuff.
Yeah, I hope this is just the first of a few, because I feel like, you know, if you have some subject that comes to you where you're like, oh, I would love to talk about this, you know, even if it's pretty granular, because we do get really granular on here, I'm totally down.
Okay, I have many ideas. I will DM you.
Okay, awesome.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We really appreciate it.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.